What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. For today's topic, I'm going to be talking about the new Captain America movie, Captain America Brave New World. And I also want to talk a bit too about some of the hate and the criticism that this movie has been given as well too, even before it was released. So let's get into it. So I want to give you all a visual of what my experience was like going to watch this movie, as I do usually when I review these different types of movies. So me and the wife went to go see this past Sunday. We got to the movie theater and it was about halfway full, which I expected because you still got spill-offs from Valentine's Day and people going to watch the movie and whatnot. So it was expected that there were going to be a decent amount of people there. But regardless, I've told y'all before, I like when my movie theater is kind of empty. I don't like a whole lot of people up in there. You got babies crying because folks didn't want to get a babysitter, so they're going to go ahead and let people be exposed to your baby wailing all the damn time while the movie is going on. You know, I don't like it when, you got kids getting up every 5 seconds and you're seeing shadows and shit going across the screen. I just don't have time for all that. I just want to watch the movie because, again, I paid for it just like everybody else. Going into this movie, I expected it to be terrible, to be quite honest with you. I felt like when it came to the promotion of the movie, it was okay. I thought that they promoted the movie itself decently, but I don't feel like they promoted Mackie that much as well. So going in, the promotion was okay, but it still didn't really get me hyped for what I was gonna go see. Ultimately, a lot of that was on the idea that I'm not really a big fan of the Sam Wilson character. He's not somebody who I can really get behind, but regardless, whenever there is a black character and he is the lead of a movie, I'm gonna go see it because I want to see what types of messages and things like that they put into these different types of movies. So that was my mentality going into this. One of the things that I've been noticing, and I've been seeing this a lot online, is that a lot of folks were saying that this movie wasn't good, this movie was going to tank, this movie was terrible, this movie was just going to be the worst thing ever, it was going to be a total disaster. And I gotta say that although the movie wasn't spectacular, although the movie wasn't excellent, it wasn't on the level of a Black Panther or a Winter Soldier or a Thor Ragnarok, the movie was still alright. It was still a pretty decent show. Like, it was something where, whether you're a comic fan or whether you're not a comic fan, you could kind of get with it a little bit. So I thought it was not as bad as a lot of the people who said it was bad were saying. If I had to pinpoint the main pros with this movie, I would say was the action and also the continuity. I thought the combat scenes were good. I also like the idea that they were continuing a story that they told in the past and they were showing how it's developed many years later, because they kind of did the whole thing where they were going back to the mindset of Ross and all the stuff that he's done over the years, either with chasing the Incredible Hulk or his issues with the Avengers and all this other stuff. So I like how they had continuity and they went back to something that they had discussed in the past. Now, for some people, they may see that as a con because they're like, well, I started watching the movies, later down the line, so I don't remember all that, so I'm gonna have to go back and watch the other ones. But for the sakes of storytelling itself, they did a great job. I've told you all before, I'm a storyteller, so if I feel like the story itself is good, then I will give it credit for that. So I did think that that was well done from that perspective. If anything, the only thing that could have somewhat ruined the way that they told the story was the fact that Red Hawk was in the previews, because as people were watching Ross's character take these pills, or they heard about him taking these pills and there being a possibility that it was tainted, ultimately people could have put two and two together before it was shown that Ross was going to end up being Red Hulk. So I could see where people also had a problem with that. Now, what I will say is that there was a lot missing with this movie. So for example, I'll name a few things. I won't name everything, but I'll name a few things. Number one, I felt like when it came to this movie, it was a story that could have been told without the inclusion of Sam Wilson. Now, some may argue that, well, Sam was needed at the end because somebody had to take down Red Hulk. But it felt like a story where instead of it being about Sam Wilson himself, it felt like it was about everything around Sam Wilson and he was just included. Same goes for Isaiah Bradley. It just felt like, okay, we're going to cut and paste and insert them into a story that could have been told without them. And ultimately, I felt like that was a con because your story should really focus on the hero, not necessarily on the idea that there's a background story going on and this character is really just being thrown into it. I also was not buying Ross being a sympathetic figure, and I know a lot of the other audience members weren't buying that either, because think about it. You have this dude who did all these horrible things, right? And all of a sudden he's just redeemed for everything that he did because he wants to be a better father to his daughter, or at least prove that he is a better father to her. So all of a sudden he's positioned as a guy who's changed. Yet he was being racist in the damn movie because he was calling Sam boy and shit. So that tells you a lot about his character. So ultimately, I think Marvel was trying to paint this picture like they do in a lot of movies where somebody who's just totally shitty has a good side, so they're redeemable to a certain extent. But I want to be clear, although I'm bringing up these couple cons, I think it leads to what I feel was the overarching message and the agendas that were being put in this movie. So let's talk about that for a second. My theory when it comes to this movie was that Marvel was trying to tell this movie from the perspective of Sam as a token. So let me explain what I mean by that. I felt like instead of this movie being called Captain America, Brave New World, it should have been called Captain America, The Thoughts of an Unwoken Token. This entire movie was told from the perspective of Sam Wilson, but in his tokenized mindset. So it was taking you into the thought processes of someone who was very tokenized and somebody who was trying to make it seem like they are within this system that is obviously ruled by white supremacy, but they are changing things by being inside of that system. When in actuality, they're not really changing anything. They're just being a representative, a face of symbolism that doesn't really make any real power moves outside of, again, being a symbolic gesture. Not only was this movie showcasing his thoughts as an unwoken token, it also was depicting his fantasy as if this is a common reality, or as if this was a way to show black people that this is how we all should be. We all should be individuals who want to have a seat at the table in order to prove that the world is changing. So instead of doing tangible things for black people, the way forward is for us to be a part of the symbolic gestures that show that there's a change, but really this is nothing more than a facade. Sam Wilson reminds me of those black boule Negroes and those seat at the table Negroes who believe that their presence alone in the dominant society's businesses and organizations and all this other stuff is an example of how the world is changing and is less racist, instead of actually making real tangible changes or building something on their own. If anything, when they get inside of these systems, they don't do anything but what is told of them, even if it means that they denigrate other black people. And they do this at the end of the day because they know that there's a payout for this type of behavior. Now, when it comes to Sam Wilson, one of the things that I noticed in this thought process was that he was getting challenged a lot because he promised Isaiah Bradley that he would get some type of recognition for everything that the United States government has done to him, and especially everything that happened involving the super soldier serum. So he again was being tested here because Isaiah was reminding him like, yo, they did all this stuff to me and whatnot. And Sam was like, well, I'm going to make it up to you by having you be amongst them, which is not really an honor. Why would he want to be amongst the people who had done terrible things to him? Because all that would do is present an opportunity for them to do something else to him, which actually happened because when he was mind controlled, they didn't even believe that even Sam, when he tried to clear Isaiah's name. As a matter of fact, they were over there saying that that Sam needed to basically let it go and that Bradley was guilty and that he needed to go to prison. The other thing that I noticed about this movie was that they tried to, while taking you into Sam Wilson's mindset, present this image of another black person who was a token as well too, to take your attention away from the fact that Sam himself was also a token. They tried to make somebody who was much worse than him, in other words. And so they did that with this black woman who was a employee, a very subservient negress at that, to Ross's character. And they had it where she was kind of bucking her eyes and she was trying to get Sam not to rock the boat, and she wanted him to tiptoe around asking Ross questions and trying to get Isaiah out and all this other stuff. And you could just tell that the idea there was to say, well, Sam's not the token. Sam is this codified individual who's trying to make changes. And here is this woman, and she's just a subservient mammy. And I'm going to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if she was non-FBA, or at least that was what they were trying to convey with her character. But of course, they didn't go into culture and all this other stuff. The other thing I want to say too is, it's just crazy to me how they take these little tokenized side characters of these white heroes and they just don't give them no type of love interest or no type of black love interest. And like they go for movies and different TV shows even, and you just never see them with any love interest, let alone a black love interest. One of the other lessons that they tried to portray through Sam's character, or I guess mentality in this case, was the idea that black people should get involved in other people's business. Because let's be real, the issue between Samuel Stearns and Ross was none of Sam's business, but here he was getting involved with it by being his side piece. Let's just be real. And it kind of reminds me of when black people are told that they need to get involved in different issues such as the Palestinian thing, and such as, you know, the idea that ICE is trying to round up a bunch of immigrants and we should be putting on the cape for all these people. And the interesting thing about this is they're asking us to be a part of all these different issues, and these same people will never even advocate for laws to be passed for black people or for there to be reparations for black people as a whole. And I don't want but it's not old people, it's not old people. I don't want none of these silly ass Negroes to come at me because I said that. I'm talking about the vast majority. As a group, this is something that is not practiced, but we are always told to get in everybody's business and put the cape on for everybody instead of basically telling them, hey, that's y'all, my name is Bennett, and I ain't in it. So with Sam's character, they had him basically all up in some business that had really nothing to do with him. Now, one could say that, well, they did mind control Isaiah and all this other stuff, but that's because he had already poked his business in the situation to begin with. At the end of the movie, they tried to present the image that if you follow Sam's example, and I guess this is still looking at his own mindset at this point, that you can, as a black person, do whatever you please, and this is the way to success and change. Because look what Sam was able to do. He was able to free Isaiah Bradley, despite the fact that he shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. And on top of that, too, he was able to inspire other Hispanics and non-blacks and all this other stuff to be just like him, you know. But the reality is that if we really are looking at real life, look at our criminal justice system. It doesn't do anything for black people, and the people who become lawyers and attorneys who claim to be advocates for social justice and trying to create empowerment for black people don't really get anywhere. They don't do anything that's constructive. Some of them even have been accused organizationally even of taking the profits and the proceeds that have gone towards trying to create justice for the families of black people who have either been unalived or they have been harmed by the white supremacist or by white supremacist actions from police, or they've also too been wrongfully accused of a crime and then they received the death penalty because of the actions of a suspected white supremacist judge. So it shows you that this is not the way to correct all of these things that commonly happen to black people on a regular basis. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, in addition to some of my thoughts on the way that they were trying to frame this movie, was the idea that there was a lot of hate surrounding this movie, but it ultimately leads to this theme of there always being some level of contempt whenever a black person is presented as either a headliner or a main character of something big that is going to be coming out. And we are now seeing a trend of this because we see the reactions to people before and after the Kendrick Lamar halftime show performance, and we see the before and after of the reactions of people, specifically the dominant society, of course, with the Captain America Brave New World movie. There have even been people who have gone as far as referring to this movie as Captain African America, which I was like, wow. The problem is that you have these suspected white supremacists who are eating mayonnaise out of a jar and on 4chan and are spewing all of their hateful rhetoric and all this other stuff. And then you have these tethers who have an issue with these types of depictions because they do not like to see the image of a foundational black American excelling in any way, even if it is just something that is symbolic, or even if all they're doing is creating art. So yes, we could talk all day about the tokenism and all this other stuff, specifically with Captain America and Anthony Mackie, but at the end of the day, people just don't like it because there's a foundational black American on its surface to begin with. So this now exposes the mentality of those who actually hated it for illegitimate reasons. Now think about it. A lot of these same people are not going to admit that it's because it's a foundational black American on screen. They're going to try to use other things as a means to explain it away. Oh, it was a bad movie. It was bound to be a bad movie. Or in the case of Kendrick Lamar, I wanted to see somebody else. I wanted to see Miley Cyrus. I wanted to see, I wanted to see anybody but Kendrick Lamar. I mean, why do we have to see a hip hop artist? We could have seen anybody else. So that's why they, try to allude to other things, because it's a way for them to shield the idea that they don't want to say there's a black person, specifically a foundational black American in the case of your tether class, who is about to perform something and is about to knock it out the park. Because here's the thing, some people will go and they'll say, well, Captain America tanked anyway, but Kendrick Lamar's performance did better than Michael Jackson's in 1993. So what do you have to say to that? One of the reasons why I believe that the hate for something like Captain America is even going on is because the dominant society is playing what I believe to be the two different wings on the same bird agenda. So I came up with this concept from this idea of what Malcolm X once said about how basically the white supremacists are basically operating from two different wings on the same bird when it comes to the political stances. So in other words, white liberals are no better than white conservatives when it comes to racism towards black people, or anti-blackness as I would like to describe it in this video. Now, the same concept is being applied when it comes to the way that black people, specifically in this case black men, are portrayed in media. When you have white conservatives that are watching as a black man is being portrayed in some type of movie, TV show, or some type of production, they ultimately start equating this with some type of DEI concept, and they like to group everything together and then call it woke or whatever they like to call it, because they like to make it seem like the issues of a black person, the issues of a woman, the issues of someone who's Hispanic, the issues of somebody who is Arabic are basically all the same issues, and they group it together. And you can even see this to some extent when you look at the Captain America movie, and they had Sam talking to old boy who was sitting on the bed after he had got injured, and he's supposed to be the next Falcon. He's Hispanic, and he's talking about how, he's creating a way so they can have a seat at the table. So they kind of threw that in there, and I noticed that. And then, it was almost as if the young man who was on the bed, who was trying to be the next Falcon, was talking about how, he needs to, try to aspire to better because he thinks about how his life was in the past when he was in Miami. So it's almost like he's equating this idea that either his family or himself, who immigrated from some other Hispanic country and came to the United States, specifically Miami, has the same struggles as a foundational black American who has a family lineage that goes back to having experienced 400 plus years of slavery and the after effects. So they're basically comparing these two things. That's why I say that the dominant society, at least those on the right, have this idea that all of these struggles are the same. And if it's not an Anglo white male, then it's something that can be just categorized as woke. So they ultimately have a level of vitriol if there's a black man who is presented. They do it with black women too, of course, but in this case, a black man, because they are included in this pile of woke and DEI. And what's ironic about that is that we are actually the least likely to actually benefit from DEI benefits whatsoever. Matter of fact, we only have benefited from it by 4%. So we're the ones who are being headlined and have been showcased as, individuals who benefit from it the least. In the case of liberal suspected white supremacists, they like to almost make it seem like black men have a certain privilege still while they are within this whole idea of being a person of color. So they've even tried to pretend like we can even be oppressors of white women. Even look at shows like Invincible, where they try to make it seem like, there's this brother and he has this white girlfriend, he's trying to oppress her, and that's because men oppress women, instead of actually looking at the dynamics of being a black man versus being a white woman. And if you really want to go back to history, it will teach you that white women also were slave owners of black men and used to do sexually deviant acts with these black men and force them into having sex with them and doing all these other really crazy things to them. So it's interesting how we got to this idea that now we're supposed to be victimizers, not just of black women, which is already crazy, but of all women. And as far as the tether class, more so with the whole Kendrick Lamar and Drake thing, the reason why all that went on was because ultimately the whole beef between Drake and Kendrick Lamar was a shot at them. It was a shot at this idea that a lot of black people from the diaspora who are anti-black and are against foundational black Americans can come over to the country, cosplay us, take the culture and all this other stuff. And if we call it out, then we're the ones who are called divisive. And Kendrick Lamar did that. So a lot of their hatred was because they were getting called on their bullshit. Let's just be real. Didn't y'all find it weird too that Isaiah Bradley was going out with a friend, that being the small Russian chick who was beating up dudes who were like 3 times her size? That was kind of strange to me. He just doesn't seem like the type of brother, like an old school brother, like a civil rights black man, to go out with a young white woman and maybe even suggest that there may be something between them. Kind of weird, ain't it? If I had to rate this movie, I probably would give it about a 7 out of 10. It was decent. It was probably a mid-range Marvel movie. It's not something that I'm like, okay, I gotta go see again, but it's certainly not as bad as everybody is saying. All right, y'all. Hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say. If you liked the video, then I would love for you to like this, subscribe, share this, and hit the bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. Other than that, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.